My name is Kimberly Berens, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you guys tonight about some of the work that we've been doing at Fit Learning in the area of strengthening reading comprehension skills with a variety of kids through the fluency building of core language components. So before I start, I'd just like to have the opportunity to talk to you about, a little bit about who I am and what Fit Learning does. We started Fit Learning about 13 years ago, three of us. There's three founding directors, Nix Berens, my husband, and then Kendra Newsom and myself. And over those 13 years, we've really been working towards developing a comprehensive academic kind of transformation program based in applied behavior analysis that targets all kinds of learners. So although my original area of expertise was autism, I really branched out. Now I work with a portion of autistic kids, but a lot of other kinds of kids as well. So, everything I'm going to talk about tonight is highly relevant for kids on the spectrum, but it's also applicable to any kid who has a critical kind of reading comprehension issue, or any kid that also has any other kind of core language delay. So at Fit, we work with all kinds of kids with dyslexia diagnoses, attention deficit's a huge one, kids who are just struggling, or kids who are actually gifted and talented and need further enrichment. So we're really like a supplement to traditional education. And in some cases, we'll have kids enrolled as their school environment. So parents will choose to do a homeschooling program, and then they'll enroll their child at Fit for a significant number of hours a day. So we currently have 3 and almost 4 centers across the country. Our original office is in Reno, Nevada, and we have an office in Oregon, and then we have one in Locust Valley, New York, which is where I'm located right now. I'm in Locust Valley, New York, and I'm currently working on opening an office in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. So we have 4 centers all over the place, so we do this with a lot of kids. So tonight, I really wanted to have the opportunity to share with you some of the real breakthroughs we've made in the area of language building and producing transformation and comprehension skills. And I want to really, I have lots and lots of outcome data I could share, but I thought it would be relevant because this presentation is really geared towards the parent or the practitioner. So if you're a BCBA out there, I think you'll get a lot out of this talk as well, but I really dialed down the technical language because I want, my commitment and goal inside of this presentation is really to give you a skill set that you can actually start implementing with your kids like tomorrow. So, a real practical tool that you can start using on a regular basis to start making some profound gains with kids. So it's a real practical presentation. So that's kind of the commitment I have inside of what we're gonna address this evening. So next slide. Where we really came from in developing this language building program and targeting comprehension actually came from like a practical problem we were faced with at Fit Learning about 8-9 years ago. So we had developed a really profoundly effective reading intervention program that really is based on the whole idea of building reading fluency. And in this program, we're really dealing with what I like to call like reading mechanics. So it's the mechanics of reading. So phonics, how to decode words, something that we talk about as phonemic awareness. So the ability to understand how, words are made up of different phonemes and how those phonemes have different patterns. And there's rules that, dictate how you decode a word according to those phonetic patterns. And so we've done a lot of work in the area of building reading fluency and transforming reading skills at the level of mechanics. And so we started becoming aware of a problem that we had, where we'd have 2 kind of groups of learners presenting at Fit. Both groups would present with really poor reading skills, right? So their reading mechanics were poor. They were well below grade level. Reading fluency wasn't, they were reading at a very, very slow pace, very labored pace, lots of decoding errors. So, reading was definitely an issue. And along with that came a collateral comprehension problem. And so we started to find that we had 2 kind of groups of kids. Although we work with a ton of different kinds of kids, you can kind of lump, the kids that we're talking about today in these 2 categories, where one group of learners would make profound gains in our reading, or both groups of learners made profound gains in our reading program, and their reading skills were moved to grade level. And then, one group of learners, their comprehension skills would collaterally improve as well. So even though we never targeted comprehension in the sense of, really directly targeting that in of itself, it improved on its own as a function of our reading program. Then we had another kind of core set of kids that we produced profound gains in reading, yet their comprehension skills did not improve, and they remained poor. And so this was kind of a challenge for us, and we were, faced with addressing these issues in a more intensive way. So next slide. Okay, so how we addressed this issue originally, and this was again 8 years ago, was that we would use traditional strategies that were quite common in schools. So for instance, one traditional strategy for training comprehension is something called pre-telling. So what you do is you give a child a paragraph or a passage, and the first thing you do is have them look and see, read the title, read any headers they have, maybe look at the pictures, and then you give them the opportunity to kind of describe to you what they think the story is going to be about, or the passage is going to be about. So they engage in that skill. And then you give them the opportunity to actually read the passage. I'm going to have to turn this down. I'm getting some feedback. Sorry. You give them the opportunity to read the passage, and after that, you either ask them explicit questions about what they read, or you let them do a retelling of the story. And so these are really traditional strategies that you'll see in all classrooms across the country. But the problem is that and the research, a lot of research supports this, that these strategies are largely ineffective for a very specific set of kids, particularly kids who have a history of language delays, especially those who have an autism diagnosis of some sort. These prove to be really ineffective. And so, this is kind of what we were doing at FIT, and although we were producing a immediate improvement on paragraphs that we were training, we were getting no generalization or emergence to untrained or novel passages. And so we know that as our goal is to produce generalized repertoires and emergent skills. So this is not what was happening with these strategies. So we decided that we needed to really kind of change course. So next slide. So we began to ask ourselves, what is comprehension? The founding directors, originally in the Reno office, now still there, and we're out here in New York. But when we were together, we had the benefit of the University of Nevada and working with a man named Stephen Hayes. And Stephen Hayes is a behavior analyst who has been kind of in charge of leading a movement called relational frame theory, and something related to that called derived relational response. And it's really in the similar camp as equivalence. And so again, this presentation is not a technical one in the sense of really delving into that research paradigm or that theoretical perspective. But I did want to mention that that's kind of where the origin comes from. And that I think it would be to everyone to, if whoever's interested out there, to actually delve into that a little bit, kind of see where this all came from. So a lot of what we, ask ourselves with respect to comprehension and what it means came from that research paradigm. So anyway, so what does comprehension mean? Well, it means really interacting meaningfully with text. So what does that mean? Well, number one, it means making inferences and predictions. And so as a lot of, as most people can already understand, just as a lay term, it's really being able to infer something that isn't directly stated, right? So like if you're reading a story, inferring how someone feels based on a situation, even if it's not clearly stated. And then a prediction is using the information you have in the text based on your own experiences in your life, your own experiences with reading something similar, predicting what you think might happen in the next, happen next. So making inferences and predictions are critically related to comprehension. Identifying similarities and distinctions or differences. So, one of the ways I know I'm a novel that I cherish, I can compare it to things I've cherished in the past, either experiences I've had or experiences I've enjoyed by reading similar books, or things that have happened in history that I found interesting. And the same thing with the distinctions, so, differing together. So how we engage more meaningfully in reading activities is by being able to do those kinds of relational tasks. Clearly, you have to take the perspective of another person. Like, you have to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the character of the story, or even the author if it's written in first person. And we all, I know that in the autism world there's a large movement towards the importance of understanding perspective and dealing with developing that kind of programming and early intervention programs. And so we address that, and I'm going to try to kind of hit on that a little bit tonight. And then finally, there's categorization. And so being able to classify or categorize things into clusters and groups, classifying subjects, characters of books as similar, or content of books as similar, the main idea versus specific details. Those kinds of activities are essential to comprehending. So when we, really started delving into this issue, you realize that, well, comprehension is actually inherently language-based, because all of these things aren't simply related to really being, engaging meaningfully with what you're reading. They're actually related to engaging meaningfully in the world at all. So engaging meaningfully with your partner, or with your friends, or your family members. Engaging meaningfully with people at work, engaging meaningfully with your peers, or having social interactions, engaging in conversations. All of this is related to everything that it means to really be human and engage socially. So we really felt that we were delving, to really address comprehension, which is kind of up here when you think of the ladder of skills. There were all these core language skills that we weren't really addressing, and that's really where we needed to start. Next slide. So before I get into, what we have discovered in terms of critical, skills related to transforming comprehension for all kinds of kids, I want to address, some kind of key terms I'm going to be using repeatedly throughout the presentation, and kind of give you some understanding about those. So I use the term component skill all the time. That's really the basis of everything we do at Fit Learning. So at Fit Learning, we have broken down very complex repertoires like reading, math, critical thinking, language, and writing, expressive writing. And we've broken those down into tiny little pieces or tool skills that over, our 13-year history with over 1,000 kids, and, really kind of evaluating our program in a systematic, data-driven way, we've been able to identify which skills are essential for the accomplishment of something more difficult. And that's the whole point of what we do at FIT. So the whole point is developing a child's basic kind of component skill repertoire to optimal levels of mastery, so that you get a generative repertoire. So a tool skill really is the basis of all other complex skills. And the perfect example is phonics, for instance. If you want to get a kid reading, well, the first thing you got to do is teach them their letter sounds. And you don't just teach them their letter sounds so that they're not making errors. You teach them their letter sounds so that they're automatic. So they're kind of doing them without thinking. There's speed and accuracy. And what we know is that's kind of what's required to produce a generative repertoire, which means the ability to do something that's never been trained really well, only as a function of training a piece of it, or a tool that's required for it. And so what we also know kind of in my branch of behavior analysis that we do at Fit Learning is that it requires something called fluency training. And so, I didn't, you have to pick and choose kind of what you can address. So I didn't spend any time in this presentation addressing precision teaching. And I just kind of want to mention it here because, what we do at Fit Learning is based in something called precision teaching. And a lot of you out there watching have probably heard of precision teaching, or even do precision teaching, or are familiar with it in some way. And if you're not, I really, again, encourage you to maybe follow up a little bit with that, because although I want to spend time talking about fluency and fluency training, I also want to emphasize that precision teaching is a branch of behavior analysis that is simply a measurement system. It's a standard, universal, absolute measurement system that allows you to really evaluate when fluency has been achieved, and to make really careful, precise, systematic decisions regarding your instructional practices. So, that's kind of the guiding framework that we do everything from. It's the springboard from which everything happens at FIT. And so I really encourage everyone to kind of follow up with that, because in order to make really profound, transformative impacts on kids, we have to have a very sensitive, standard, absolute, precise measurement system, just, like our forefathers had in our basic science. So that's what we really adhere to. So kind of that's all I'm going to say on that. But if you can follow up a little bit and get some information about what precision teaching is and how to start incorporating that kind of measurement system into your practices. Okay, so next slide. So, so what's fluency? Well, fluency, is actually in our everyday vernacular, right? Like everybody knows what the term fluency is. It's, if you're fluent in a foreign language, it means you can like be enmeshed in the culture and it's automatic and it's second nature and you're not stumbling and, thinking and trying to grasp words. You're speaking with pace and with complete expertise. And so the guy who actually introduced fluency into behavior analysis is someone named Carl Binder. And again, he's a precision teaching person in behavior analysis, and he coined the term fluency just for the reason that I said, which is that it is a part of our vernacular, and everybody kind of understands what it means. And he wanted to make it kind of understandable to educators or people working with kids that it was another way of thinking about mastery. And so fluency is really a measure of accuracy and pace, okay? So it's not just like percent correct, which is like, number correct out of a total number. It's actually a combination of correct with time. So again, as I, mentioned precision teaching a minute ago, one of the, again, the most essential kind of feature of what I'm going to talk about tonight, not only is what language components to train, but how to measure them and how to evaluate if they're mastered. Like those are two essential things that I hope everyone gets out of this tonight. So the two most fundamentally important dimensions of behavior are count and time. That is it. That's an understood in learning science, which is where all of this comes from. And it's something that I take the opportunity to emphasize every time I can. So if you're a practitioner out there and you're using solely using percent correct measures in your work with kids, I really encourage you to pay attention to this part and delve further into it after this presentation and really get some understanding about what the problem is with that. I'm going to spend a little time on it tonight, but I can't, again, this isn't a measurement talk. So, I could spend 5 hours just talking to you about measurement. So I'm not going to do that, but I want you to really think that the two most fundamental dimensions of behavior are count and time. And so that's what fluency entails. Fluency entails count and fluency entails time. So number correct per minute or number incorrect per minute. That's a standard, absolute, and universal measure of behavior. And that's how we measure fluency. So, however, fluency has become a technical term that actually means something about mastery. So it's actually like what we like to talk about as functional mastery. The common practice in applied behavior analysis, unfortunately, is, 3 days at 80% correct, 3 days at 80% correct. And that's somehow the standard mastery criterion in this work we do. Well, not that I don't do, but, that others do. And it's interesting. I don't know where that came from. I do know there is not a single study that's been done demonstrating that that's the correct mastery criteria to use. And I do know that one of the grandest problems that people have, particularly in early intervention programs for kids with autism, is in the area of maintenance and generalization. And so I can tell you now that the fundamental reasons why people struggle with maintenance and generalization is because they're using a mastery criteria that is arbitrary rather than functional. So it's arbitrary in the sense that the teacher or the interventionist determines when a skill is mastered, rather than the child's measured behavior determining when a skill is mastered. So in precision teaching and how we do fluency-based instruction is that we actually determine mastery based on a functionally measured outcome produced on a skill. And those outcomes are called REAPs. They also are sometimes called RACA. You guys have maybe heard RACA. I find those get to be a little confusing for people. So I just stick to the old standard REAPs, which is retention, endurance, application, performance standards. So performance standards simply means that is the standard you're holding your student to in terms of what you want their performance to generate. That's all performance standards means. Don't be confused. It's just the standard for mastery. It's like, what you want your instruction to produce for your learners. So retention, well, that's really, a lot of people talk about it as maintenance, like that's like your maintenance in an autism program. And for people who are, more kind of traditional, it's really a measure of memory. So, what I know is that most of my kids come to FIT as a supplemental service, right? So I see them I see them for a very few hours a week, for like an hour at a time. And I've got to make a lot of impact on skills. And so I don't want to be wasting time training something if it's not going to be in a child's repertoire, like permanently, right? So like pragmatically, I want a skill to stay where I trained it forever, so that a kid has it in their repertoire forever. They can use it to learn new stuff. They can use it whenever they're supposed to. They can use it in the presence of anybody. It's a skill that they just have. And so retention is highly related to mastery, and it's highly related to fluency, is what we've demonstrated repeatedly, and other people have also demonstrated this. So for instance, again, I'm going to go back to the whole maintenance and generalization problem in early intervention programs. But, if you have a kid who's, mastered a skill according to your 80% across 3 sessions mastery criteria, and you have it in a maintenance binder that you're running once a day, well, I would say that that program's not mastered at all. That practice is actually inherent in mastery, and that if a child has to continue practicing something, then it's not fluent, or it's not mastered. So for us, we actually test whether a skill is mastered by, training it to a certain level that we've kind of established as a general rubric for mastery with, hundreds of other kids. But then we actually test that skill for retention with that individual kid. So we'll put it on a week check, then we'll put it on a 2-week check, then we'll put it on a month check, then we'll put it on a 6-month check, whatever. And that skill, should stay where it's supposed to stay. And if it doesn't, then we know actually that wasn't really mastered, and we have to refine our mastery criteria. Sometimes we have to refine our mastery criteria for that specific kid, and sometimes we have to refine our mastery criteria for that whole, skill for every kid. Because every kid degrades on it when we've been testing it. So the bottom line is it's tested with individual kids, and a skill is not considered mastered until we get retention. Endurance is another one that we constantly test. So this is really a good way of thinking about endurance, is like attention span and stamina. I like using those terms. Like when I talk to parents, they really get it. So 75% of the kids at FIT today could actually have an ADD diagnosis, or have one already, or are on their way to having one if we don't intervene. So this is one of the most common problems in classrooms today. There's a new article out in the New York Times almost every week about ADD and ADD drugs, and what's the best way to deal with it, and how it's now 1 in like 11 school children, or 11% of school children, which is like unheard of and ridiculous. So the bottom line is that attention span is related to mastery. Attention span is actually a product of training and mastery. It's not something that you just get it by chance, and it's not a personality trait of a kid. It's a skill that's trained and is related to fluency and related to mastery. And so again, at FIT, we train skills to certain levels, and then we test for endurance. So we test kids, maybe we're training in a small period of time, and then we check them over longer timing periods. And we actually are checking attention span all the time, because we design our centers with this in mind, and they're designed as a bullpen. So all kids work in this really loud, open, noisy, awesome room without, they're not in little cubicles, it's quiet, no one whispers at FIT, everyone's screaming and having a blast. And the point of that is because when you train in distractions and kids master skills in distractions, they are resistant to distractions like everywhere else. So it's a huge part of training, and we don't consider a skill trained until it demonstrates the quality of endurance. And this is actually a really cool little side note. So I do some like workshops for practitioners and teachers a lot. And one of the things I like to do is get teachers to get what it feels like to be disfluent, or what it feels like to be like really not proficient in a skill set. So I'll do an exercise where I make them write by 2s forwards, for 15-second timing or 30-second timing. And during the 30-second timing, I'll shout out like random numbers, and they're writing, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 20, and it doesn't throw them at all, because that's a skill we've all been doing since preschool, and most people, adults, are pretty fluent at it without practicing it every day. It's a part of their repertoire. It's a fluent skill. So they don't even notice that I'm yelling random numbers out. Then I have them write backwards by sevens. And you would think I was like giving them a root canal or something. I mean, they're like throwing their pencils down, they're swearing, they're getting huffy, they're glaring at me. A lot of them just quit, engage in like a work refusal. And it's really kind of hilarious. But it's an awesome way to show the difference in attention span and resistance to distractions when you are masterful at a skill or fluent as compared when you're not, when a skill is more labored and less mastered. And then the last thing we test for to see if we've actually achieved mastery of the skill is something we call application. And application is really generative. So it's our measure of whether or not what we're treating on the bottom, this overarching class of skill that we get with having a again, we test for this throughout training, and we don't okay, so now we're going to talk about what, oh wait, no, okay, so sorry, next slide. Sorry, got lost. Okay, there. Okay, so now I want to talk about kind of like fluency training. So how do you like get fluency to happen with kids? And again, I can't emphasize enough that fluency training in the absence of an absolute standard and universal system of measurement is dangerous. And I don't recommend it. So I really recommend like looking into a little bit of what precision teaching is and standard charting practices that come with precision teaching. But again, beyond the scope of this presentation. So I'm just going to talk to you about how to set up a procedure that would allow you to build fluency without really focusing on the importance of the measurement side, even though that's really important. So first and foremost, if you're going to measure fluency, you're measuring count and time. You've got to time, right? So you've got to set up timed practice opportunities. So to do so, you have to, every time you're doing a fluency situation, you're timing it. So I really recommend I thought I'd throw shield stock and then you have to opportunity for your student to freely respond. So now I'm going to kind of give you an example. I mean, try to give you a distinction between discrete trials and like free response opportunities, or what we call free operant responding. So in a discrete trial situation, as we know, we present the opportunity with an instruction. I mean, we present the child with an instruction or a discriminative stimulus of some sort, and the child responds, and then we provide a reinforcing consequence or a corrective consequence of some sort, if depending on the type of response. And so, although this kind of instruction is essential for getting behavior going with kids and establishing repertoires, there is a point of diminishing return in the sense that it often produces kids who are prompt dependent. And who don't freely, engage in language of any sort without being asked a question or being prompted. So, one of the main services we provide at FIT, we do not do early intervention for kids with autism. We are actually a transitional program for kids with autism, meaning they've gone through early intervention, they've made all these, great gains in some kind of ABA program, and they're transitioning to the classroom, but there's a grand gap between what they are required to be able to do in classrooms and what they, and the level they've achieved in early intervention. And although they've achieved these amazing things, it's still kind of not enough for them to be independent and successful kids in classrooms. So oftentimes they have to have aides, they're in resource, or sometimes they're even in self-contained classrooms. And so there has to be some kind of bridge between, discrete trials instruction and early intervention and a child responding like in a more natural way in the environment. And so what we've found at FIT, and we're not the only ones who do this with kids with autism, there's many other people who do this kind of work with kids with autism, is that we free up the learner, and we only use discrete trials as error corrections, and everything else we do is timed practice opportunities with a child kind of freely engaging, freely responding. So they're not waiting for us to prompt them. They're not waiting for us to provide an instruction. We create a situation where the instructional environment occasions all of this responding during a timed practice period. And I have lots of video clips to show you guys tonight, so that will make more sense. Okay, so you want to have free opportunities to respond, and then you want to make sure you have something to count. Because again, two most important dimensions of behavior, if there's anything you take home with you tonight, I really hope that's it. Count and time, count and time. So you're timing something, you're counting something. And so when we talk tonight about the core language components we're addressing, we're going to talk about how important it is to define what you're counting. So you want to make sure you have something defined that you're going to count. And then you have some kind of aim, some level of fluency that serves as like a rubric for you in terms of like where you're trying to guide a kid to, right? So like where you're trying to get them to. You're trying to build their rate. You're trying to build their count per minute to a certain level. However, that level serves as a simple guide. Again, you're always testing those outcomes I talked about with your kid. So you're testing retention, you're testing endurance, you're testing application with each individual kid, even though you kind of have an idea of where you're trying to get them to go, based on, and I'm going to give you those aims tonight for the certain skills I'm talking about. But, we set aims in various ways. We set aims by, we've worked with, hundreds of kids on this program. And in general, they show reaps when they hit this level of fluency. If it's a brand new program we've never done, then all of my coaches throughout all the centers set those aims. They practice and get to an expert level, and then they set the aim. So they set kind of like the guiding level that that we think a child should get to. And then we're consistently assessing reaps. To make sure that that's the case for every kid. Okay, so next slide. All right, so now I'm going to get into like the nitty gritty. So there are there's more than four, but tonight I want to talk about the big four component language skills that we have discovered through all of our work at FIT produces a profound transformation in the language skills related to interacting meaningfully, engaging in conversations, and engaging in comprehension skills. So those big four are naming, classifying, describing, and relating. And again, the basis for these four actually comes from relational frame theory, the notion of derived relational responding, and its corresponding research program. So those BCBAs out there, or those who are sophisticated in your level of training, I really encourage you to like delve into that and kind of see where we came from, because there is so much left to do in this area. It's unbelievable. The sky is the limit in terms of what we really need to discover and understand. And made a small dent, but there is a long way to go. So I really always encourage anyone out there to delve into this and start doing their own work in this area, so we can all kind of share in the knowledge and evolve as a science. Okay, so next slide. So now I'm going to focus on the first of the big four, which is naming. And most of you, this is not going to be anything new, but I have to include it because I want you to know, like, from the bottom up. So naming is an essential component skill for everything else I'm going to talk about tonight. So kids have to be able to name things in their world, clearly. And this is part of all early intervention programs, so everybody knows this. But the difference is they not only have to name things correctly, they have to name things fast, correct and fast. So that's what I want to kind of emphasize. So first and foremost, every single program that I'm going to talk about today, we do with these, can you see? Language builder cards. Wait on, I'm not good at this. Wait, other way. Wait, there. No. Here we go. Okay, there. Oh, it's upside down. Okay, there. So I'm sure a million of you, everybody already probably knows what these are if you're working with kids on the spectrum, but whatever, I just thought I'd share. Because I don't know if you can order those online. Just type in language builder cards and they show right up. Order them, and it's worth like the $80, $90 I think they cost. I mean, they're kind of expensive, but we do everything with these. You can produce a transformation in a child, that silly little box. And with one of these off counters, you can count your stuff, and your Radio Shack digital timer. That's all you need. So, okay, so those are your core materials that you're going to need for all the stuff we're talking about tonight. Okay, and I'm saying tonight because it's just kind of dark here. I don't know what time it is where you guys are, but okay. So I'm also going to talk to you about the fluency aims that we've discovered produce reaps. Okay, so produce those functional outcomes that you want mastery to produce. We have found that for naming, kids need to be able to name about 65 cards a minute in order to be what we consider to be fluent. So in order to like remember that and always have that in their repertoire, and they're not humming and hawing and trying to word, they're just naming it. And, we do this with all kinds of stuff. So you do colors, you do shapes, you do objects. Duh, everybody knows how to do this. But I think that the format might be different. So, if you can imagine, if you're training colors, what color? Red, good. What color? Pink, good. That's very different than giving a kid a stack of colors, setting a timer, and they're naming as many colors as they can. Forcing a lot more practice, and the color is occasioning a child's naming, not a person to respond. And that's something I really think is important for us to get away from in early intervention programs, is that the teacher controls everything rather than the world controlling everything. Okay, so next slide. And the next slide is going to actually be a video clip of a child at FIT doing naming based way. And this is actually a very mastered skill for him. This child has been in our program for a while, and I actually should give you kind of an overview, because I debated whether or not I should just throw you the kitchen sink and like show you a million kids doing a million things, or if I should do more like a case study. And so I decided to do a case study because I think it's kind of it's more refined and it's more organized. And this is a kid who came into FIT. He's on this autism spectrum. He's been through a really great early intervention ABA program, but again, he hit a ceiling, right? So he hit a ceiling in terms of where he was going. He had developed a lot of speech skills, but he wasn't using them freely. He had developed there was instructional control, but he wasn't flexible with his instruction. It had to be presented in a very systematic way. So he really had to be freed up all over the place. So he came into FIT and he started just a few hours a week as a supplement, and we saw really profound gains with him, and I'm going to show you his outcome at the end of the presentation. So he actually is now enrolled at FIT full time. He's doing homeschooling. So he does FIT 6 hours a day, and then he's in a ton of other cool stuff. Like he does a peer play group, and he does tons of taekwondo. He does tons of activities, and he's doing a ton of awesome stuff. So we kind of got him out of the traditional classroom for now, because it just was kind of a toxic environment for this kid. So, okay, so let's show the clip, and then I'll talk to you guys about it after.
So you're just going to tell me what you see on the pictures.
Okay.
Ready, and go.
Chair.
Good.
Shredder.
Good.
Window.
Good.
Car.
Good.
Feeding suit.
Good.
Tricycle.
Go.
Toilet.
Good.
Airplane.
Good.
Apple.
Nice.
Spoon.
Good.
Lettuce.
Good.
Sandwich.
Go.
Video.
Good.
Crackers. Peas. Stairs.
You're amazing.
Cupcake. Ketchup. Wagon. Candy. Stove.
What? Are you kidding? That was so good. Double high fives. Give yourself crazy clicks. Awesome job, buddy.
Okay, great. So, and again, a lot of you probably already do this. This isn't rocket science at this point. I mean, a lot of you know that naming is essential to train with kids who are on the spectrum, and that not only do you have to get kids naming accurately, but we have to get some fluency or speed going with this stuff. So, but, I don't know who knows what, so I thought I would just show it. So again, short timing periods, flipping, one of the most essential things is procedural handicaps, okay? So for instance, if you're working with a kid and you're trying to get pictures in their world and you're flipping them a slow process, well, you're not going to get a kid who's up to saying more than one a second. So you've got to flip faster than that kid can talk. So, it's so hilarious when we're training our coaches, we're getting them, they do fluency drills on flipping cards so that they don't suppress responding. Some kids are faster flippers than coaches. Those kids, we get them flipping their own cards. Whatever you do, just don't suppress the speed your child can respond by being slow. Out and try to get them to go as fast as you can. One other thing I didn't mention, all these games are set to per minute, because that's, again, our standard universal measure. Do a shorter timing period, that's okay, but you always want to consider things. So you're going to have to do a little math, right? So for instance, responding for a minute is a really long time. So oftentimes we start with kids in really what we call short sprints or snapshots. It's really synonymous with shaping, because we want to have the timing period end, and our reinforcer provided awesome responding, not when they were really awesome in the beginning of a timing, and then by the time 30 seconds or 45 seconds or a minute elapsed, plan it. We definitely don't want to follow that. So you want to select a timing period that's short enough so that they end strong, and then you want to reinforce and reinforce and reinforce, and then gradually increase your time period. And responding for longer periods of time. So the way you do that is, for instance, you think of how many intervals are in a minute. So if you're doing a 10-second timing, apply that, count by 6. If the child gets cards in 10 seconds, then they would have gotten 60 per minute. and so on and so forth. So 15 seconds, there's 4 a minute, 30 seconds, there's 2. So those are kind of the standard, snapshots that we, and then we just do do a little multiplication there, and you get a standard unit of count per minute, which is really what you should always base everything on, is something standard of that sort. And all of our aims are based on that. So you should do a little calculation. It'll help you know, if they're on the mark, even if you're not doing a whole minute. And I don't recommend doing a minute at first. That's something they have to build up to. Okay, so that just kind of shows you how much faster a kid and how much more practice a kid can get when you're not saying, what is it, what color, what shape, what's that, that's all well and good when you're trying to get that going. But there comes a point where you got to get that kid just saying stuff when they see it in their face, not when someone's asking them or providing them instruction. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so naming, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Kids have to name stuff. That is a skill on the bottom of the language ladder. So now the classification. Again, likely something you're already doing. These are skills that are all over the ABLEs and all these other programs. So, but this is how we do classification, and I thought I would just share it with you. Again, language builder cards, like I showed you that box. And again, the aim is the same. So you want to try to get kids around 65 per minute, but you're always testing. Can they do it over long practice periods? If I don't work on this stack of cards for 2 weeks, can they still do it? Are they doing it with cards I've never practiced? You want to always be checking that. So we have 2 levels of classification. So things they say. And we start with basic ones, like everybody else does, animals, food, vehicles. We move to really advanced ones. So like things I find in my house, things that grow, things that move, things that require fuel, things that are hot. It is an infinite number of advanced categories. And we do a lot of advanced classification because that's getting more into the nitty gritty stuff that I'm really excited to. I better hurry up because I'm running out of time. All right, so the next thing, the video clip showing you exactly how we do classification with kids. So you can show that clip.
Are you telling me?
All the categories.
Great, ready, and go.
Clothing.
Good, Sean.
Food.
Good.
Toy.
Good.
Shape.
Good.
Food.
Good.
Food.
Good.
Vehicle.
Awesome.
Animal.
Strong.
Food.
Good.
Food.
Good.
Animal.
Good.
Clothing.
Come on, buddy.
Toy. Food. Vehicle. Animal. Food.
Yeah!
Okay, great. So same thing, she's timing them, she's flipping as fast as she can, he's naming as many classifications as he can, so rather than saying the item on the card, he's grouping it into a category. Okay, so those are the 2 kind of bottom levels of the ladder that kids have to have, and the whole point of those things is to get them into this. These next 2 things are essential, so describing and relating. So I definitely want to hurry so I can get through all this stuff. So again, you want to use your language builder cards. Now for describing, the aim is a little lower. So the aim is 35 per minute on describing, because instead of counting like everything they say, you're going to count an idea. Okay, and you're going to see this on video clips, so you'll know what I'm talking about. So we count correct ideas. And so on this program, instead of like saying one thing for a bunch of cards, you're saying a bunch of stuff for 1 card. Okay, so we deal with describing in 3 ways. We train concrete features, expanded features, and functions. And I'm going to deal with all these things, but first I want to kind of get to this training procedure. So next slide. Okay, so in order to be able to train describing, first you have to create a distinction for a kid with respect to like what they're doing. So like, concrete feature, expanded feature, function, those might make sense to some of you out there who are practitioners and have been doing this work. It also might make sense to people who know relational frame theory, because those are big buzzwords in relational frame theory, but they're not buzzwords in everyday vernacular. So, and they're definitely not buzzwords for kids. They don't understand what the heck you're talking about. So we do concept instruction on all of these things, which means we train them to understand or have a distinction about what a concrete feature is versus an expanded feature versus a function. And I actually have a video clip of us doing concept instruction with a kid. Oh, not ready for that yet though. Go back, sorry. I actually have a video clip of doing concept instruction that I'll get to. And then after we do some concept instruction, then we're using the same procedure for everything I'm gonna talk about for the rest of the night. So the first thing we do in a session after we practice the concept is we go into a check of a novel card, okay? So this is a card that a kid has never practiced in their life in this way, okay? So, and we usually run these for like little short 30-second periods where we put a card in front of them like an elephant, and you're gonna see a bunch of these, and we set a timer for 30 seconds, and then they're describing the elephant according to whatever we're working on. So they're describing an elephant according to concrete features, or they're describing it according to expanded features or functions. It depends on what we're working on. The bottom line is it's a timer. We say, tell me the concrete features or whatever, and it goes and it's up to them and they describe. So they've never practiced that. Then we do a fluency check of them doing that same thing, freely responding to a card that's in training. So we actually use something called multiple exemplar training, which again, a lot of you have heard of, where we have, a card in training, and then they achieve fluency on that card. And then we put another card into training, and they achieve fluency on that card. And then after kids go through a certain number of exemplars on training cards, you get an emergence of fluency on the novel cards, okay? So this happens with every single thing we're doing that I'm talking about for the rest of the night. So if their fluency check on their training card doesn't look great, isn't where it's supposed to be, and their fluency check on their novel card isn't where it's supposed to be, then we do more training of the training card. And we use various strategies: modeling, turn taking, and the use of textual prompting. So I have video clips of all this. So now let's go to the next slide. So this clip you're going to see is our running a concept instruction with this kid, Alex, who has already kind of been doing this for a while. So he's approaching kind of mastery of understanding these concepts, which you'll understand. But one thing I want you to know is that this is going to seem like a series of discrete trial interactions at a very rapid pace, which is exactly what it is. But we do it during a timed practice period. So we're actually timing his responding to our instruction and counting his answers in the same way as we would count them, even though they're not like freely occurring. It's more like a discrete trial, but we do it at a rapid pace. It provides a lot more like mastery of the concept. Okay, so you can play the clip.
What are we going to talk about?
Concrete features, expanded features, and functions.
Okay, that was better. So, Andrew, what's a concrete feature?
Things we can see.
Really good. Give me an example. God bless you. Can you give me an example of a concrete feature?
Color.
Okay, great. What else?
Shape.
Really good. What else?
Number, size, parts.
Really good. That is such strong talking. I'm so proud. What's an expanded feature?
How it might be different.
Like, what's another type? That's really good. What's another type?
What you might see it with.
Okay.
And where it might find it.
Okay.
And how it might taste, feel, smell, or sound.
Really good, dude. Awesome job. And what are functions?
How things are used.
Good. And are there two types of functions? Don't talk like a robot, man.
Yes.
That's close. What are the two types of functions?
Common and creative.
Really.
Okay, so in that clip, you saw him responding to, instruction about what concrete features are. And he's giving you the type of concrete features, and he's giving you the type of expanded functions. And so I just wanted to kind of let you see what that looks like, because before getting kids to freely practice it, they've got to understand what they're actually supposed to be doing. So next slide. So now we're going to talk about some of the actually saying. So what are concrete features? Well, concrete features are things that you can physically see. Okay, they're like physical attributes of something. They're like details, right? Details. So color, size, location, number of parts, right? So now I have a little clip of Alex doing concrete features of I can't remember I think it's a donkey. Yes, and this is a skill that he has mastered. So this is actually a novel card that he's never practiced. So you can kind of see how fluent kids can get with this when they've had training on it. So I'm sorry, play the video. Perfect.
It has 4 legs. It has a tail. It has 2 big ears.
Awesome.
It has a head.
Yes.
It has eyes, nose, and mouth.
Good.
It's on dirt.
Yep.
The dirt is brown. The grass is green. The grass is short. It has a small tail.
Really good.
It has a big belly.
Really good.
It has calves.
Great.
It has little feet.
Yeah.
It has paws.
Great. Really good.
Okay. So you can hear him in that video clip, really fluently describing the picture of the donkey. So rather than waiting for us to ask him, what color is it? How many legs does it have? How many ears does it have? How many eyes does it have? what, all the, where is it? Those kinds of questions. The picture itself sets the occasion for infinite amounts of responding until the clip is over. I mean, until the timing's over. So we count everything he's saying in that period of time. And so the training procedure for that is the same procedure we use to train expanded features and functions. And so I actually have a clip of the expanded features training. So I'm not going to talk to you about how we trained concrete features right now, because we use the same training for expanded features, and I have that clip. So let's look at the next slide. Okay, so after we get kids able to describe, according to concrete features, everything they see on a card, we move to expanded features. So expanded features are things that you actually cannot see, and this is where you get a real burst in language, because what you're really doing is training inferencing with concrete things. I mean, we assume once kids start reading that they're going to be able to inference or engage in inferencing about text, but that's ridiculous. Like, if a child can't engage in an inference about a physical, simple object present in their space, they're definitely not going to be able to do that in text. So expanded features are where you might find it, what you might find it with, how it might be different, or how it might feel or taste or smell or sound, and emotions that it might produce. So next slide, I actually have a video clip. The first part of the clip is Andrew, and I keep switching back and forth, sorry, doing expanded features training, where we're actually training him how to respond to, we're training him on a specific card. So with Andrew, we use modeling, with textual prompts. So, we provide a model, he responds to it, and then we write it on the board, because he's always been very good at, using the use of textual prompting. So let's show that video clip.
Of the taco, what are we training?
Expand features of the taco.
That was such strong talking. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so what are the different types of expanded features you know?
How might be different when
Good.
I find it when my food and not my taste, feel, smell, sound.
Good, so now we're going to train those in all the different types, okay? So where might you find it?
At the store.
Good. What could you find at the store?
At Pathmark.
Okay, so you could find the ingredients at the store.
Or Stop and Shop.
So what could you find at the store?
Ingredients.
Good. Where could you find them?
At the store. At the super.
Be crunchy. Good.
Crunchy or hot.
Crunchy or hot. Awesome. So now can you read all of these really strong for me, please?
Find Louise at supermarket.
Good.
Talk about.
So good.
Restaurant. See someone eating it for lunch or dinner. It could be with rice, beans.
Good.
It could be with
Say strong fajitas.
fajitas.
Good.
Be burrito or taco salad. Be soft taco.
Good.
Or a
Okay, ready? And go.
Find the greens at supermarket.
Good. Keep going.
Be at Taco Bell.
Good.
Or Dos Tacos.
Good.
Or Mexican restaurant.
Good.
It be fajitas.
Good.
It be a burrito.
Good.
It got sour cream. It be taco salad.
Good.
It be soft taco.
Good. Keep
It
going.
be enchiladas.
Enchiladas.
Good.
Good.
It be quesadilla.
They could be chocolate chip cookies.
It be chocolate chip cookies.
Good. They could be cupcakes.
It could be cupcakes.
Good. They could be cake.
It could be cake.
Great. They could be crumb cake.
It could be crumb cake.
Good. You could buy them at the grocery store.
Find the grocery store.
Good. You could find them at the bakery.
Find a bakery.
Good. You could smell them cooking in the oven.
Smell the cookie.
Good.
Be cupcakes.
Good.
Cake.
Good. What else could they be?
Crumb cake.
Good.
It could be on top of ice cream sundae.
Good.
It could be right out of the oven
Mm-hmm.
when it's hot.
Good.
Okay, so in that clip, I wanted you guys to see how I should kind of strategize. One is response or like or response to develop thing. Then I wanted to show you just a straight up model. It's where you model expanded features of a respond back and time them. So those are all kind of examples of training. Now, next slide, we're going to show you his ability to do it practice.
Oh,
It'd be saying, hee-haw.
great.
It could be running around.
Okay,
It could be horse. It could be in grass.
good.
It could be lying down.
Great.
It could have a baby in its belly.
You
It
could.
could have a big tail. It could be a cat.
Good.
It could be chasing someone.
Okay.
could be racing animals.
Okay,
It
don't
could
talk
be
like a robot.
At a barn.
It could be at a barn.
It could be sleeping with other animals.
Great.
It could be with a cow.
Okay.
It could be staying.
Okay, so you see in that clip, he's never been trained in his life to provide the expanded features of a donkey. So what I want to demonstrate from that is that when you train enough exemplars of expanded features with this a small subset of cards, or even you don't have to use cards, you can use anything in a kid's environment. We just use cards because they make it procedurally easier. You get an emergence of this as as a generative repertoire that a child can use across the board. Okay, so next slide. So now we are going to talk about functions. So you get kids describing concrete features in terms of everything they can see about something. Then you're dealing with expanded features where they're engaging in inferencing. And then we have them do the same thing with functions. And what are functions? Well, it's how things are used. And we deal with two types of functions. So a common function, like the function of this glass is that I drink from it, or I use it to drink. And then there's a lot of infinite number of creative functions or inferences about how I can use the glass. Like I could use it to hold pencils or pens. I could use it as a vase for flowers. I could put it on my head and balance it to practice my posture, whatever. So there's an infinite, again, number of functions that can be said about any item. And what we found is that this again, like expanded features, this makes a profound impact on inferencing and problem solving. So next slide, I'm going to show you a clip of Andrew doing functions of a pencil first. And the pencil he was trained to do in a training kind of situation. And he's just freely practicing after he did some training. And then I'll show you a novel clip in that same frame of him practicing it with a shovel, which he's never been trained to do. So you can play the video.
You could use rather to mom or dad.
Good.
You can use it to write a story.
Good.
You can use it to draw uppercase letters or lowercase letters. You could use it to draw numbers, draw swings. You could use it to write pictures. You could use it to draw the town of Locust Valley.
Okay.
You can use it to draw a school.
Good.
You could use it to draw a house.
Great.
You could use it to poke your food. You could use it to pick your nose.
Ew.
You could use it to play the drum set. You can use it to eat steak. You could
Okay.
use it as chopsticks.
Good.
You could take the eraser off.
Okay.
You could
Ready
use
and
it
go.
to sandcastle.
Great.
Or a wall.
Okay.
Or a town. Or a market.
Strong talking, dude.
You can use scoop strawberry sorbet.
Okay.
Scoop ice cream.
Great.
Or jello. You could use as a spatula.
Good.
Stir cookie batter, cake batter, pancake batter,
Good.
or cookie batter.
Good.
You can use it to hide some treasure.
Oh, hide some treasure. I like that one.
Okay, great. So you can see how a lot of amazing things came out of his describing the common and creative functions of a shovel, and he's never been trained to do that with a shovel. So, I could use it to find treasure. I could use it to scoop ice cream or sorbet, which are his favorite things. A lot of amazing language coming from there. And again, I didn't have time to show a lot of pre-post clips of him, but I'll tell you that this is the kid that wouldn't respond if I put a shovel in front of him. It's at best he would have said it's a shovel potentially and nothing else unless I asked him questions about it. So that explosion of language and describing I can't emphasize enough the impact it makes, providing that much of an opportunity for a child to freely engage. Okay, so next slide, I'm gonna have to hurry. So now we're getting to the last of the four, which is again so important, which is relating. So this is a situation where you have two or more cards in front of the kid rather than one, and you're getting them to engage in identifying similarities and differences among things. And again, language builder cards, same fluency aim of 35 per minute. Next slide. So the first level of relating, or the first area of relating we're going to talk about is similarity. So how are two things the same? And when we start doing this with kids, we begin at level 1, which is like how two very similar items are similar. So how is a horse like a cow, or a tree like a flower? They seem very similar. Then once we get some, we build some fluency on some exemplars, and we get some emergence on novel, pairs of cards. in that level, we move to level 2, which is two very dissimilar items. And this is where there is such an explosion. Again, we get these bursts and impact. And this is one of those critical skills. You can't get there without having features and functions and concrete features in place, because they use all those skills in comparing things according to similarity and difference. And you can't get it unless they can do it with very similar things either. So there's stepping stones to get to this point. So next slide. I'm going to show you now just a video clip of him doing level 2 similarity. So he's comparing, I think it's a motorcycle and a lion, according to how they are the same.
Now we're going to do a 30-second timing. You're going to tell me all the similarities between these two, okay?
Yeah.
Ready, and go.
They're both in green grass.
Good.
They're both outside.
Good.
Both could be a prize rocket sack.
Strong talking.
Both can wake you up with loud roar.
Good.
Both can make you feel scared or sad.
Good.
They both could be a house lion with stuffed animals.
Good.
Both could be lying down and eat shy.
Good.
Both could be in a movie.
Good.
They could be in Africa.
Good. They could be in Africa.
They could be in Africa.
Good.
Okay, great. So you see in that video clip that, he's able to identify similarities between two very dissimilar items. So, a motorcycle and a lion are not similar, inherently, but there are more similarities among things than we realize, and than kids realize potentially. So when you train a very small set of exemplars in this area, you get an emergence of their ability to find similarities among dissimilar things, as a generative repertoire, and this produces such a profound impact in their ability to engage, in conversations and engage meaningfully with text and expressive writing and all of those things. So that's a really essential area. And finally, is distinction. I'm actually going to skip the video clip on this one because it's so similar to similarity. I just want to talk you through it though. So again, just like similarity, we train distinction. So finding differences between things, again, 2 items on the table. So first we start with 2 things that are extremely different. And then we move into things that are extremely similar. So finding the differences between a horse and a cow, for instance. And again, all of these relating and there's a whole host of things that we do after this. We move away from features, when kids kind of go through this whole sequence, then we remove cards and we're just saying words to them, like, describe a house to me, describe a chair, describe a building, describe school. And then we move away from items and into activities and events, and so forth. So, there's ways to move it into the abstract, and then we're moving into more, textually printed words and lists. And, there's lots of ways to move into the abstract after they've achieved fluency on novel, multiple novel exemplars on all these categories. Okay, so let's skip to the next slide. Perfect. So, and again, I want to share with you 2 kinds of outcome data. So when kids start at our program, we do an intake assessment, and our intake assessment really entails identifying like all those component skills involved in our overarching kind of academic sequence that we do. So we have an assessment for reading, and it's like every single component skill for being a fluent reader, and same thing with math. And so we've developed that same kind of assessment for what we call our Fit Logic program, but that's really inferencing, predicting, critically thinking, all those language targets that we've been talking about with Andrew. Sorry, I'm kind of out of the screen. Okay, so, I didn't deal with a lot of these, but on the, these are kind of the big kind of core things we're working on. So instructional control, answering, having a story read to you and answering questions about it, which is your listening comprehension questions, listening to a story and retelling what you heard. And then we get into the ones that I actually dealt with: naming, describing, and classifying, and relating. And then finally, there's sequencing, which I didn't have time to address tonight. So let's focus on the naming, describing, and relating. So first of all, let me tell you how to interpret this figure. We're actually looking at count per minute on the vertical axis. Okay, so that's your fluency measure. The red bars reflect our aims. So that's where we want our kids to get on these skills, because they typically produce reaps. But again, in our training, these are just a way of demonstrating outcomes to parents. In our training, we are evaluating these like very individually and systematically with each kid. So instructional control, let's skip over that. That was he had that pretty well intact. Again, the blue bars are where he was at intake. The dark orange bars are where he moved to after 40 hours with us, and then the light orange bars after 80 hours with us. So first of all, before we even deal with listening comprehension, let's skip over to naming, describing, and classifying, and relating. Those are the areas I just talked about. So that was, the initial section on naming. That's his ability to rapidly name things, and you saw him doing that. He came in doing, we moved that pretty quickly, and we didn't spend a ton of time on that. Describing and relating, on the other hand, were not happening at all. That was so low. So you can see that in 80 hours, he's well above the fluency range on that. So now if we jump back to listening comprehension, this is me reading a story to him and him having to answer, number one, questions about it, or engage in a retelling about what he heard. So we never targeted this at all. Nothing we did was related to comprehension at any level. We never targeted retelling, and we never targeted answering comprehension questions. So you can see at 80 hours, he moved to like 79% correct on a comprehension question assessment. And we don't do a fluency measure on that because it's just, answering questions that we present. So it's kind of suppresses how quickly that can happen. So we only show our percent correct data for that. But retelling really, really matters, because that's when we read him something and then we start a timer where we say, okay, tell me everything you can remember about the story. And it has to be in the order in which it happened. And so you see that simply by targeting naming, describing, classifying, relating, and then sequencing, which we didn't really have a chance to deal with, that profoundly impacts his ability to retell something that he's heard. And also I have, other more traditional measures. So next slide. Okay, so these are his outcome data on a more traditional measure of comprehension. So first, we have reading. This is table form. On the left side, we have reading operations, which really is like a reading fluency assessment. And we like to get kids to around 150 words a minute at his age, because it really kind of mimics conversational speech, and it's been demonstrated to be, produce REAPs. So we did do some reading fluency and mechanics work with him. As you can see, he moved from 109 words per minute to 185 words per minute, 88 per minute to 132 words per minute. And so that's all well and good. We know that he's reading really well, in mechanics. Let's go to the next section, which is the comprehension. And this is actually something called a maze task. And it's something that we use, it's called Ames Web, and it's curriculum-based measurement, which is also another really awesome thing you should investigate. It's a way of doing some, weekly ongoing broad scale progress monitoring with kids. And it's a database. You get a license, and then you have a different assessment for every week of the school year, and you can enter your data into a database, and it shows you, your kids' percentile rankings and lots of cool stuff. So we use that as well. And a maze assessment is really a comprehension measure because it's a paragraph and there's words missing. There's 3 words in parentheses that a kid has to circle the right word. So at intake, which is like that first column, he was scoring below the 5th percentile for kids his age, according to this national, their national norm reference. So he was getting like 33% correct and 1 correct answer in the assessment period. After 40 hours of simply working on those, well, not simply, but working on those profoundly important language skills, he jumped to 57th percentile on that task. And then after 80 hours, he moved to 99th percentile on that task. And we never, ever, ever trained that task. That was a complete assessment. We've only trained those language-based targets. So the last part of this, the last domain is the QRI, which some of you may be familiar with. It's another more standardized reading assessment. It's qualitative reading inventory, which involves reading a very lengthy passage, engaging in a retelling of what you read, and then answering comprehension questions. And so he was not accessible at this at intake. That's why it says NA. He wouldn't read a passage of that length, and it was really long. He couldn't tell me anything he read, and he couldn't answer a single comprehension question, which is why I got that listening comprehension score instead that you saw on the previous chart, because I couldn't get a score on his comprehension at the reading level at intake. So after 40 hours of that language building and reading mechanics program, he was able to completely read the lengthy passage, and engaged in 100% correct 14 ideas per minute retelling, but still couldn't answer a single comprehension question. And then after 80 hours, if you look at it says without look backs, that's him answering some of the questions correctly without having to look back. And then when I just let him look back in the paragraph, he was able to find the answer himself independently 67% of the time, which again, that's not where we want him. And we had a lot more work we clearly had to do. But I'll be honest with you, these are the data that really served as the catalyst for his parents to pull him out of school and have him do this intensively because they saw the potential there for him. And he's been in our homeschool. These data are pretty old compared to where he is now. He's been in our homeschool program for a while, and it's pretty profound. So last slide. So I know this is a ton of information and not enough and not detailed enough. So I'm happy to have correspondences with people. So I thought I'd provide you my phone number and my email, and also that's our website if you want further information about our organization. And then I see that there's some questions that have come in on my internet. So if we have time, I'm just going to go forward and answer them, or try to. Okay, so. The first question is, if you drill a kid on the language builder cards to increase their speed, aren't they going to memorize the cards and it won't show that their word recall has actually gotten faster and better? Okay, so I'm not quite sure what you mean, because we actually want kids to memorize the names of things in their world. So that's a good thing. Like if a child is naming, picture cards more quickly, then they have memorized that skill and it's more readily available for them to use for doing other things. So I'm not quite sure if I've answered that. Now, if you're talking about memorizing words that that we've modeled for them for describing, well, we actually have really strong data on that suggests that when you model, a way to describe a picture according to concrete features with enough exemplars, you get an emergence of novel responding to novel cards. So it actually trains like a flexible repertoire, and you actually get emergence of like flexible, novel quality of responses. So I'm not sure if I've answered that question, but okay. When you do classification drilling, do you pre-agree on what the categories are given, that there are an infinite number of categories out there? The boy said food, but it could have been breakfast food, for example. Exactly, so that's a good question. So we start training really simple, like I said, basic categories first. And then what we do is we train a subset, and it's exactly the same thing. We do multiple exemplar training of abstracted categorical distinctions. And what we tend to get is an emergence of novel arbitrary classifications when you train kids in a subset of exemplars. And I didn't have a lot of time to really address that. But like, for instance, what we'll do is we'll train things that are salty, right? And we'll give kids like a stack of cards about things that are salty. And then we'll probe like a stack of sweet things. And what tends to happen is after they've had enough, and these are very, these aren't the only examples. When you've had enough kind of arbitrary classifications going along with a lot of the other work we're doing, you get an emergence of a kid's ability to classify things in more arbitrary ways. Another way to do it is to actually have it, give a kid a set of 3 cards or 4 cards and put them out on the table at the same time and have them come up with as many classifications about those 4 things as they can. That's actually a really better way to deal with arbitrary classification than giving them a huge stack of cards and having them just name one thing. It's better to give them multiple cards and have them name a bunch of things about just those 4 cards. So for instance, potato chips, French fries, whatever. The ocean, things like that, and then have them say as much as they can about, as many weird arbitrary classifications as they can about those 3 cards. And then you provide the same kind of training on that you would, like we do for the other, describing and relating programs, and you kind of start getting this emergent repertoire of ability to engage in arbitrary classification. So we actually have some good outcome data on that as well. This one says, you mentioned that we should delve into the PT literature. Is there a how-to book on how to implement PT and fluency-based instruction? There are a lot of how-to books on how to implement PT and fluency-based instruction. The newest one that I'm so happy I get to do like little advertising thing for is Rick Cubina out of Penn State, and he does this a lot with kids on the spectrum, has just published a book on precision teaching, you know, in a real applied manner, you know, in a real applied form. So that's a great book. There's many others, and I'm actually happy to get, you know, if you guys send me an email, I'm happy to give you guys like an extensive kind of reference list on if you really want to delve into this stuff. I've got a reference list I can just send off to you. But that's a great place to start. Is Rick? Right here in my list. It's Designs for Excellence in Education. The Legacy of B.F. Skinner. It's edited by Weston Hammerly, and that has an amazing chapter. It's also a chapter on direct instruction. So, but there's a ton, so to share, and I am thrilled to do that. Has there been any research on teaching language using these methods? Well, like I said, these methods come directly from an extensive research program in relational frame theory and derived relational responding. So absolutely, they have been researched. I also, there's Kendra Newsom, who's one of the founding directors. She did her dissertation on, you know, a subset of this, and I think her data are in review right now. She's, you know, in the process of getting those published, so those will soon be out. My husband, Nick Berens, has published some things in this area. And there's others. So there absolutely are, there's plenty of research suggesting that kind of these are kind of profound things to include in your research programs. But I will say, you know, I am not a researcher. I'm a practitioner. Like, I run clinics and, you know, have hundreds of kids coming out my ears. So I'm not, you know, a big publisher, and I'm not a controlled researcher. I mean, I've been involved in that stuff, but I'm a clinician. So, you know, our data are mainly, I keep going the wrong way, are mainly clinical outcome data. But, you know, when you obtain them or with enough kids, you know, and it's replicated over and over and over again, those are actually pretty telling findings as well. And so, you know, I always say we're going to eventually get our book published where we have all our data in one place. And that's, you know, a mission that we have. But there are absolutely research, you know, studies available on this stuff. So I recommend starting it in the area of relational frame theory and kind of going from there. And I don't see any other questions in my inbox right now. So again, I really thank you guys for listening, and I thank you know, this Skills for asking me to be a part of this. And feel free to contact me if you have any information or any questions or want more information. And I've really enjoyed sharing all this with you. So have a great night.